Roger, aka Joe Keto. Tonight we are joined by the very, very wise Dr. Brian Johnson, the Keto Doc. Doc, I'm going to start off with, just a real easy one. For those people that are new to this conversation, can you explain what exogenous ketones are very quickly? We're going to assume that everybody's watched the campfire video. If you're watching this and you're like, I don't even know what ketosis is,
yep.
Ask somebody to share with you something very simple that will explain that to you. Exogenous ketones, though, Dr. B.
All right. So basically, when you're talking about ketones, especially in your body, there's three forms, okay? And the active form is called beta-hydroxybutyrate, okay? So exogenous ketones is where you actually, usually you either have to be starving or in a severely carbohydrate-restricted state for your liver to then start making beta-hydroxybutyrate out of your own fat tissue, okay? Now, if you take exogenous ketones, what the technology has done is they've taken basically a coconut oil or a medium chain triglyceride and in a very special way created beta-hydroxybutyrate that is exactly, our max ketones are exactly identical to the type of ketone that your liver makes. So this is a fuel source that your body can use for energy.
Amazing, amazing. Now, a lot of people that have looked at this think about this as a weight loss product, and now we know that there's absolutely nothing in this that is going to, you take this drink, you drink it once a day, and all of a sudden it turns you into this fat burning machine. But what role do the ketones play in the whole weight loss, fat loss equation?
There's quite a few roles. So some of the big roles, a lot of people who are overweight or struggle with their weight eat because of cravings and addiction. And a lot of those cravings and addictions start because they have blood sugar fluctuations. So if you're eating a standard Australian, standard American diet, let's say you have a bowl of Wheat Bix for breakfast or a bowl of breakfast cereal, you're going to have a massive surge of sugar into your blood. And so your blood sugar is going to elevate. You're going to have a lot of energy, but then your body's going to compensate by putting insulin in, which is then going to cause your blood sugar to drop. And when that drops, you're going to feel tired, lethargic, irritable. But then your brain is subconsciously going to be hunting for that next spike. So it's going to start looking for quick sources of fuel and sources of energy, which then brings you back to the sugar. So that's one of the big things. Also, whenever you're in a state of ketosis, it controls your ghrelin hormone, which is your hunger hormone. So most people, whenever they use the product, just simply don't eat as much because they're not as hungry. And there's no concern with developing an eating disorder or anything like that. It's just you only eat whenever you're truly hungry, not out of habit. So that's one of those are probably the two biggest things that I see with the ketones.
Okay, amazing. Now, you mentioned something there, a very key word in health these days: hormones. Right? What are ketones? I mean, I hear a lot of great anecdotal stories. I see a lot of things online about people seeming to have some great results with this. Is there some relation between ketosis? Is there some relation between exogenous ketones and our hormones?
Without a doubt. Some of the current studies that are coming out, they're actually showing that beta-hydroxybutyrate is a signaling molecule in addition to an energy molecule. So it actually signals different hormones to be released. So in a traditional fasted state, your growth hormone elevates through the roof. And so whenever your growth hormone elevates through fasting, it's because of the presence of the ketones. So, this is where a lot of people who exercise and train a lot, now people are moving into training in a fasted state. And a reason for that is because of elevation of growth hormone, elevation of testosterone levels. These things happen also when you're in a ketogenic state using the exogenous ketones. Also, what happens when you're having blood sugar fluctuations, you're having spikes in cortisol as well, your stress hormone. So your cortisol is actually made from the same building blocks as your sex hormones. So if your body is having to use all its building blocks to build the stress hormone, your sex hormones are dropping, which is not good. So your testosterone, all of those types of things. And that's where a lot of men are resulting to hormone replacement therapy. A lot of women are. It's the biggest thing in anti-aging right now, is trying to control these hormones. The problem is if you do it unnaturally, so you're actually injecting exogenous hormones into your body, then your body stops producing its own. It's called a negative feedback loop. Whereas if you just create a situation in your body to where it naturally normalizes them, then that's sustainable. It's going to increase your health. It's going to be great.
So we got an incredible amount of thumbs up and hearts when you started talking about sex hormones. I don't know what's going on there. Apparently a fairly prominent topic. So listen, on that, I mean, you talked about a few things there, and human growth hormone was one of the things I heard. I guess, I want to talk about performance and physical performance and stuff like that, but one big thing there is, people that are having hormonal issues, is that going to be, and maybe they're taking the exogenous ketones as well, is that something that they may hold them back from losing weight as well? Like, is that something that they need to be aware of?
Oh, absolutely. Because a lot of your weight loss is not just calories in, calories out. It's controlled by your hormone levels. If you're very estrogen dominant, you're going to hold on to fat. That's just what happens. Estrogen causes women to store fat. If your insulin levels are out of control because you're a type 2 diabetic or you're a borderline type 2 diabetic, insulin makes you, hold on to fat. And so you'll be storing fat. So you'll need, for people like that, it's going to be a very slow process of reprogramming their physiology. And that's where the beauty of these ketones are, Joe, is because my whole career, I've been trying to educate people to make better choices, to try to put them on the paleo diet, the keto diet, just a common sense diet. And the thing is, people get excited about it, and most people will stick with it for a couple of weeks. But that's not where you get the benefit. It's where you change your lifestyle. And so these ketones give people that little bit of boost, little bit of energy, and they feel great. So then they take the next steps, and you see, before you know it, they're biohackers, or they're doing all kinds of things to try to improve their health. I've seen it time and time again. It's awesome.
Yeah, cool. I mean, and that's, so what would you suggest to someone that is, maybe they know they've got some hormonal issues, maybe they've heard that from their doctors, and there is something that's holding them back. Are there some things that they can do more to help this be more effective for them?
Absolutely. So, here's what we tell people. So you could keep everything the same, take the product, and you'd be healthier, right? Because you would be exposing yourself to this native state energy. But if you start, especially people with hormonal issues, polycystic ovary, polycystic breast, all these things that are linked to hormone imbalances are also linked to insulin resistance. Okay, so the first thing that I would do for any of those people is remove any processed sugars, processed carbohydrates out of their diet, and start eating real food. That's where the reboot comes in great, because it just breaks that mold. And I don't know if we were going to go on that tangent or not, but I'm just so excited about that reboot program, because it basically gives them 60-hour punch in the face that really gets them going and makes them feel great. And that's the best way to start it,
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about the reboot program for sure. Now, a couple questions that have been coming in about adrenal fatigue. What is the role of keto? How do people get adrenal fatigue, and what is the role that the ketones could play in that?
Yeah, so adrenal fatigue is basically your adrenal glands are the glands that produce your stress hormones. Okay, we are in a state of chronic stress in our life. Like we're experiencing more chronic stress than ever in human history. And people say, "Oh, well, life is so easy now." Yes and no. We've got mortgages, we've got family issues, we've got society breakdown. We have all of these issues. Plus, we're constantly being fed a lot of stuff through social media, television, and our diets are terrible. So what that means is that our adrenal glands are just pumping out stress hormones, all these all of these stress hormones, and eventually they fatigue and they can't pump them out as much as they should. Now that can also be affected by blood sugar fluctuations, put your body in a state of chronic stress, excessive consumption of caffeinated beverages, like energy drinks, like these things, because they ramp them up and you actually produce more. So what's great about these products, if someone's in adrenal stress, then I would recommend when they use the product, they use a caffeine-free version. And I would also recommend that they eat as clean as possible. So what that's gonna do is that's gonna give them a good energy source without being an overstimulated energy source.
Gotcha. And any other type of dietary things that they should be doing?
Yeah, depending on, it's hard to overgeneralize, but I would, with someone who was stressed out, burned out, adrenally shot, I wouldn't put them into a hardcore ketogenic diet. I would still give them the ketosis, but I would add some quality carbs, like your sweet potato, your pumpkin, those types of things. Some very low glycemic carbs, but you don't want to trigger another stress response.
Yeah, that's a great point. So that brings us into a question that, I think a lot of people probably know this the longer that you are in the community, but people don't need to be in a ketosis diet in order to get the benefits from exogenous ketones, correct?
Not at all. And I think that I always base my health advice on almost like a paleo ancestral health view. And if you look at our genome over millions of years, it's evolved to have periods of fast and feast. And so I think it's normal for our physiology to go in and out of ketosis. Now, if someone's never been in ketosis and they have type 2 diabetes or they have some kind of blood sugar management problem, then they need to spend some time deep into ketosis to resensitize their body. But for the average person, I think that it's great to have a carb refeed day periodically. You want to make sure that you're efficient in burning all energy sources, so that when glucose is available, your body uses it very appropriately, and when it's not, you can immediately switch over and start using ketones.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a number of the questions that we were getting the other day before this thing, and so thanks for keeping the questions coming in here, guys. And so I'll answer a couple of ones that people had kind of put up here that I've been writing down as we go, and I'll just I'll preempt this by saying, look, we don't make medical claims about this product in any way. Anybody should be talking to their health professional before starting on these products or into any new health routine. But just, generally, there's always people that want to know, where is the relation? What is the science seeming to be showing about the relation between ketones and autism?
Well, so how can we say this appropriately? So in a child or in an individual who has autism, then a lot of times their brains aren't being fueled appropriately. I think even Dominic D'Agostino went in talking about glucose transporter problems in the autistic brain. And what we find is that the autism, Alzheimer's, dementia, Huntington's, any kind of neurological condition, those brains tend to be hypersensitive to fluctuations of blood sugar. This is why if you take a child who has autism and you feed them ice cream, they're uncontrollable. The autism just the symptoms shoot through the roof. But whenever we give these individuals, we put them on a low carb diet. We also would decrease certain known reactive things like dairy, wheat, and soy. And then you give them a good quality fuel source like the MCT oil, the ketones. Their brains tend to calm down and they tend to be at much higher functioning. It's not a cure, but it definitely allows them to have a much higher quality of life, and it also improves everything, their environment. Yeah.
Awesome. Very well said, I think. Another one that had just popped up there, and we can generalize this, I think, with a lot of different autoimmune disorders. It seems like the prevalence of autoimmunes are gaining so much in this day and age. Well, a lot of people are saying that, if you take just the symptoms of,
just one
of
second.
autoimmune, like chronic.
Sorry, my daughter's going to bed. I had to give her a kiss. Okay.
Beautiful. If you take the symptoms of autoimmunes, chronic fatigue, or I guess, if someone take a Hashimoto's or fibromyalgia, I guess from the big parts of those are, I guess, some pain and joint pain and stuff like that. Why might people with autoimmunes be finding some release for whether it's from the keto diet or ketosis or exogenous ketones?
I think there's multiple reasons. One of the big things that beta hydroxybutyrate has been shown to affect inflammasomes, which is what triggers certain inflammatory markers in your body. So a lot of so when someone's in ketosis, all their inflammatory markers start dropping through the floor. Now, inflammation is just a symptom of an underlying condition. So in someone with, say, rheumatoid arthritis, the inflammation that's in their joint isn't the rheumatoid arthritis, it's the symptom of the rheumatoid arthritis. So what's causing that inflammation is the autoimmune reaction where the body is attacking itself. Now, there's a reason, and this goes back to my health philosophy. When the body is not operating right, there's always a reason. So, and I could go in a rabbit hole that isn't appropriate right now. But if we can figure out what the reason is, and usually when people are developing autoimmune conditions, it's due to some proper immune reaction. A lot of time it's associated with leaky gut, with bowel issues, with intact proteins absorbing through the intestinal lining into the bloodstream, which then trigger a autoimmune or immune reaction. The body makes these immune complexes that are looking for the protein that's in the blood, but if they don't find that specific protein they're made for, they'll find one similar to it. Okay, and that's like Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's is big time associated with that. Pretty much all of them, in my opinion. That's. So I don't want to go too deep in there because it's kind of like riding a fine line for compliance issues, but yeah.
Yeah, no, there's amazing, in our customer group, we've got an amazing video dedicated all towards autoimmune disease and different aspects of it. So, another thing that comes along, and I think, there was some questions about what this is doing for the brain, and I think we could go down a rabbit hole there as well, but I know this is a specific area of interest for you as well. From an anxiety perspective, and that certainly comes along with a lot of autoimmunes, but also with a lot of other things, everything from PTSD to just everyday life. Yeah. Everybody's experiencing some level of anxiety. This is one of the things that I think has become pretty clear with all the new research on ketones and the brain, and what's going on in our brain so I guess starting from an anxiety standpoint.
Yeah, so I just read a really interesting study that was done with exogenous ketones, and it was actually the formula of beta hydroxybutyrate mixed with MCT oil, and I believe it was the patented product that Pruvit has that was used in the study, and they were studying mice that were genetically engineered to have anxiety. And then they were giving them boluses or large doses of exogenous ketones, and they had a way of measuring the anxiety levels. And they showed a massive reduction in anxiety in the mice that were receiving the exogenous ketones. And I think it can go back to a very simple principle. It's a great fuel for your brain, and it's a constant, steady fuel for your brain. So if your brain is being fueled constantly, it's going to function appropriately. But if you're having massive blood sugar spikes and drops, then over time, your body's going to perceive that as a stress. And every stress that you have is like throwing a rock in your backpack. So, just allows the brain to function so much better. And there's, we could go into the hypothalamic, the HPA, adrenal axis, and all of the stuff that has to do with anxiety. But basically, it just calms the brain down and allows it to function the way it's supposed to.
Gotcha. And that spurs off into, kind of different mood disorders. Is it all interrelated into neurological disorders that people are always talking about as well?
It is. There's been some huge studies done with depression and BHB. Not a cure, okay? That, again, we're not making any claim for that. But what happens when you fuel the body the way it's supposed to be fueled? It functions the way it's supposed to function. So, that's the long and the short of it.
Hey, so a real interesting question came up there, because this is, it's about different levels of ketosis. Is there something different that's happening in somebody's body if they are in a low level of ketosis? And I'll get, for people that don't measure their ketone levels, it really doesn't matter. But if you're someone that is measuring that, is there a low level of ketosis, a medium level of ketosis, and a high level of ketosis? And is it better to be in any one of those?
That's a question I get a lot. And so let's start with what the levels of ketosis are, because another question we get is about ketoacidosis. Okay. So can I touch on those three and then come back to what's desirable? All right.
You can do whatever you want, my friend.
All right. So someone who's following a normal carbohydrate diet or a normal Australian type diet, they would still normally wake up with a mild level of ketones in their blood, somewhere between 0 and 0.4. Okay. But their blood sugar is going to constantly be elevated. So it might be somewhere over 7 or 8, and even higher. Now, whenever you are in ketosis or nutritional ketosis, that's actually anywhere from 0.5 millimolars all the way to 7 millimolars. Now, I've never met anyone that hit 7, but that's still a normal, healthy, non-dangerous state. Now, while you're in that, your blood sugar is going to be low, okay, if everything's working the way it should. So your ketones will be elevated, your blood sugar will be low, nutritional ketosis, all kinds of health benefits. Now, when someone says ketoacidosis, are you concerned about ketoacidosis? Unless you have a pathological condition like uncontrolled type 2 diabetes, you're never going to enter into ketoacidosis. So ketoacidosis is anything from 15 to 25 millimolars of, so it's like, levels of magnitude greater than what we would ever get with exogenous ketones. And your blood sugar is through the roof. So those two combined is what makes it really dangerous. And then your blood becomes acidic and it becomes very dangerous. But that would never happen in someone that didn't have an underlying pathology. So then,
gotcha.
Got that? Okay, so then we'll go back to, because I hear this all the time. People say, oh, I took a max 15, an hour ago and my blood ketones were only 0.7 or something like that. That doesn't matter. As long as you're over that 0.5, you're still in ketosis, and everyone's going to have a different experience. I can drink a max and mine might go to 1.5, and you might drink a max and yours go to 0.7. And it has to do with something called MCT transporters. Okay, these are medium chain triglycerides transporters. And so this is how your body transports those ketone bodies into the mitochondria or into the cells for energy. And so everybody genetically and lifestyle-wise have different number of these. And the longer that you stay in ketosis and follow a low-carb type diet, high-fat diet, the more of them that your body starts to produce. So if you lived a ketogenic lifestyle for 15 years, you're going to be really efficient at utilizing those ketones. So you're not going to have free ketones in your blood. They're going to be in your cells being used. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so you may be fasting, you may be following a ketogenic diet, you may be taking exogenous ketones, and you never get them over 0.1, but it doesn't matter because your body's using them. Whereas someone else might be able to go all the way up to a 0.5 because they're hanging around in their blood, they're not going into the cell and getting utilized. And that also brings us to don't use pee strips to measure your ketones. It's very inaccurate. It just shows what you're excreting, what you're kicking out, what you're not using.
Okay, cool. So now on that, and I don't want to keep everybody too long, and we're going to do these things a lot.
Yep.
One more cool question, though, that people are messaging me, not asking the questions in here, is somebody that's in ketosis already.
Yep.
Why would they take an exogenous ketone?
Energy, increased energy, increased mental clarity, shoot their ketones a little bit higher so that they do feel a little bit better. And most people cannot maintain a strict ketogenic diet long term. It's you know a true, and a lot of people tell me they're following a ketogenic diet, but they're not. Yeah, if you actually start weighing and measuring, to get up in that 70% fat range, you're eating a boatload of fat, you know, and very little, only like fibrous green vegetables and moderate amount of those. It's really difficult to maintain a high level of ketosis without it. So I think that's one reason. Also, like our ketones, they're not just the ketones, so they're the highly available. They also have the fermented amino acids for tissue healing, and now the AC11, which is a whole nother step.
But that brings up a great point, Doc, because I mean, you are, you've seen all the supplements come out in the industry, and now that, I know that we've talked about the fact that, then when you saw these ketones, since you've been studying ketosis and trying to help people move towards these healthier lifestyles, how much you loved it from a compliance standpoint with your patients actually following dietary regimes and just getting them these benefits. But now there's, other ketone products have come onto the market. You can choose whatever you like, and you know all the research, and you know food additives, and you choose to utilize Prove It pure therapeutic exogenous ketones.
Yep.
For yourself and your family.
All of my family. My son, who's 1 year old, he just had a bottle of goat's milk with a quarter of a thing of Swiss Cacao decaf. He's a little under the weather, so we wanted to boost him up a little bit. So yeah, everybody in my family. My wife took them throughout pregnancy while breastfeeding for energy. Now she takes them around young children. Everybody uses them.
And your patients in your practice?
Yes, we have a lot of patients. Not all of them use it, but a lot of them. And the reasons are simple, Joe. It's the most clean product I've ever seen. There's no fillers, there's no artificial sweeteners, there's no artificial flavoring. Everything is clean and pure. The ketones that we have, the max ketones, are the only ones on the market that are 100% the bioavailable form. All the other forms are a mixture of what you use and what you don't use, and there may or may not be challenges or complications with that. And then we're constantly adding stuff. Like we're the only ones who have the AC11 added into it, which becomes quite synergistic through the anti-inflammatory markers with the AC11 and the protecting the telomeres. And again, I don't want to go too much into that because that's not what tonight's about. But Prove It is constantly innovating. And I just had a caramel bone broth for lunch today. And it's like, when I saw that, I'm thinking, salted caramel bone broth, that sounds horrible, but it was actually quite refreshing. And then when you look at it, it's like collagen proteins and collagen peptides and BHB and just only good stuff. So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you get a whole bunch of shares of this already, a whole bunch of views of this already, and a load of people giving you love and thumbs up and hearts. What does this allow you? This is going to be shared and viewed by tons of people, learning all about health, right?
Yeah.
This is all because of the community marketing model that Prove It has chosen to bring this, out to more people. What does that mean to you as a practitioner? What's that going to give you the ability to do?
Well, I think I've said it to you before, Joe. So, I've had very large practices in my life, but even no matter how big your practice gets, you're very limited on how many lives you can influence. You only have a sphere of influence of people who actually come in. Whereas with this model, I'm able to work with people all over the world, literally, I have people all over the world. And we're influencing people to change their lives and then to go out and change their communities' lives. And one of the saddest things is when you look at the health of our society right now and the direction that it's heading. You know, it's quite fearful for my children, for what they're going to inherit, because on the average, health is just plummeting, and healthcare expenses are shooting through the roof, and something's got to give at some point. And whenever you're relying on a doctor or on a drug to solve a problem that's caused by your lifestyle, that's not a winning solution. And the only way to fix that problem is to teach people how to improve their lifestyle. And this is one of the greatest vehicles I've seen for it.
Dr. Brian Johnson, though, buddy, always amazed by how much knowledge you have in your head. And I really appreciate you sharing that with all of us.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I enjoy sharing the information.
You're awesome, buddy. And everybody watching is awesome as well. Thank you all for spending time with us tonight. And let's get this information out to people. Everyone, this live is a wrap. Have a fantastic evening. Thanks again, Dr. B.
Cheers.